Welcome, my emerging expat. You're tuned in to Let's Move to Portugal. I'm producer Dan, and I have the distinct honor of bringing you YouTube travelers and our resident Portugal experts, Expats Everywhere's Josh and Kaylee. Each week, they'll inspire, they'll educate, and they'll accompany you on your journey to Portuguese residency. This week on Let's Move to Portugal, Josh dives into the intricate world of expat finances with John McNerney, unraveling the contrast between living in Spain and Portugal. Get ready for an enlightening discussion that could redefine your financial strategies abroad. Stick around.
Hey, expats and travelers alike, welcome back to the Expats Everywhere presents Let's Move to Portugal podcast. I am your host, Josh. I am not with my co-host, Kaylee. She is sick. So I will run through kind of the weekly welcome here, and then we'll jump into the podcast with John McNerney, where we talk a lot about financial situations, not just here in Portugal, but also a little peek into what's happening in Spain and how to, I guess, compare if you want to move to Spain, which, many of our listeners and viewers do. They're considering either moving to Portugal or Spain, as those are two very commonly compared places. We kind of dive into what that might look like. So I wish I had Kaylee here with me so I didn't have to go on these long-winded, let's say, monologues, but here we go. This past week, we have still been recording our daily spending, and we're doing a challenge, a 30-day challenge, to see if we can live on the Portuguese minimum wage. We made massive mistakes this week in terms of not actually tracking it every day, and then we got to the end of the week, and then we started to tally it up, and our spending got a little out of control, and it's going to put a hurting on us for this week. So we're going to be not even ballers on a budget this week. We're just going to be strictly on a budget. So that's going to be challenging, and it already is kind of coming to a head already as we're planning out grocery runs. So what's happening with the Vertical Community Project? We've gotten all the footage for episode 1, and this week my mission that I've accepted to do is put that stuff together and get out a video about the Vertical Community Venture, which is going to be on a separate YouTube channel called Let's Get Building with Josh and Kaylee. So that is all about our purchase of a property here in Porto, Portugal, and our hopes to renovate it and turn that building into 6 units. So that's a really exciting project we're working on. Weather has been decent, not great, but it's been decent. So it's looking like it's going to improve drastically this week, which for demolition, it's kind of good and bad. I mean, you don't need perfect weather for demolition, but you do need it to not be downpouring or pouring buckets, which we've had as well. So we have a Lisbon trip coming up because our daughter's passport needs to be renewed. If you don't know, minors have to have their passports renewed every 5 years, and Valencia is coming up on that. So we have to get that done. So that's fantastic. Another trip down to Lisbon. Now we're looking forward to it. We're going to be there over the weekend, so we'll be able to get some stuff done. And then on Monday is our appointment. So if you have any questions actually about kind of what those consulate visits are like, feel free to email us. Email Kaylee at info@expatseverywhere.com, and you can ask your questions there, and then or podcast at expatseverywhere.com, and maybe we can address those in the podcast. I think that'd be great. Okay. So we are going to be looking at John McNerney today. He's a guest that we've had on the podcast quite a bit, actually. He might be the only reoccurring guest that we've had, but it's mainly because we love him. We find him really valuable. We have great energy and chemistry with him as well, so it's easy to talk to him and do podcasts or videos with him. We're actually going to do a video with him down in Lisbon. But he's essentially a financial advisor for expats. He's made the move to Portugal himself, so he's really knowledgeable on, American and Portugal things, whether it's taxes or just finances in general, what sort of financial vehicles work and what don't. how to optimize your finances. And then he's also looking in at other European countries. So if you're not just considering Portugal, but even other places, then you need to get connected with John. This is not an advertisement at all, but I'm just saying like he's a really great resource for that. So like I said earlier, we focus in on financial management and planning between Spain or Portugal. So that's something that we actually had a lot of fun talking about, and I apologize in advance for telling you that this episode doesn't have the structure as some of the other interviews that we do, because we just kind of left it open and we wanted to see where the conversation went. But I think that there are a lot of really valuable nuggets of wisdom that John drops throughout it as we just kind of free flow through the conversation. So I think that you're going to find some really good value out of it. There's also a bit of clarity on some tax laws and financial planning for potential expats. If you're looking to move abroad, what are some of the do's and don'ts? And John really aims, not just in the episode, but just in general with his business, is to kind of clear confusion and offer practical advice. He's a super practical guy, and we just had a lot of fun with this one. So if you have any questions off the back of this, or you've listened to several episodes already and you have questions that you'd like to ask us or like us to dig into, please email that to us at podcast@expatseverywhere.com. We compile those into like a larger show that we do. We do those every, I don't know, maybe 10 to 12, even 20 weeks. We do like to put those Q&As together. Without further ado, let's talk to John with Green Ocean Global. All right, John. We haven't fully fleshed out what we want to talk about today, but I assume that we'll let the conversation go where it goes. So where would you like to take the conversation today?
Yeah. So thanks, Josh, again for letting me come onto your show. Taxes is sort of like gravity. If I'm like an if I'm like an aeronautical engineer, I love airplanes. Like I can't ignore gravity, but it's not like my central concern at all times. So
Okay.
I have a really good understanding of Portuguese taxes, and I'm always mindful of Portuguese and Spanish taxes, since that's what we're going to be touching into. But it's just one aspect of what I provide when I think about these things.
Well, what is your central concern then?
My central concern is is that thank you. That's a good tee up. I just want people to be fully engaged with their life, right?
Okay.
And when people don't move to Portugal because there's financial concerns, I want them to be super clear about why it's not going to work. Because I spend as much time as anybody does on social media, and I see people flinging around all of these concerns and doubts, and it's not beneficial to see people engaging in all of this hyperbole a lot of times online, and they don't really know what's going on. And I see people kind of getting frustrated. So let's just get clear about what we're dealing with.
Yeah, because I see the same type of hyperbole as well, especially regarding the Spanish side of taxation and wealth tax and things like that. I mean, I don't know if there's a good fundamental understanding of where these numbers come from. Like, for example, the wealth tax, which I'm sure we'll get into. We need to get into that,
Mm-hmm.
but it isn't. We are in kind of a weird space right now where I think, from my point of view, 2019, before 2019, a lot of people that were moving to Portugal were just looking at Portugal as a cheap destination, at the gateway, let's say, to Europe, to be able to immigrate to, and then possibly as a stepping stone, go to other places. Not many people had a conversation about finances and money. Why has it now come to the fore, if you will, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's because it was the main driver for people coming here. It was a main driver. People were aware of the NHR benefit, and without even really closely examining it, taking it as their sign that this is the place to move to. that, I mean, the amount of people that really understood the tax rates that were applicable to the
Mm.
different kinds of income that you could receive. You know, I talked to like literally hundreds of Americans that are moving here, maybe not thousands yet, but people don't do their homework, which I guess in a way is job security for me, right? Like that's what I do. But people don't like to think about taxes because taxes are not exciting inherently for most people. So if somebody tells somebody else the taxes are super, super low, then that's oftentimes all that other person needs. That's all you need. Like, okay, they're low. Cool. Um, Thank you for telling me that. Now I'm going to go. Right.
Yeah, for sure. But that's the tricky thing is like there's not many places in Europe where taxes are super low. So when people were hearing about NHR and this ability to move to a place like Portugal and have low taxes, it was attractive. But looking at the numbers, um, it didn't seem like that many people were taking advantage of it compared to the number of migrants or immigrants that were moving to Portugal, right? Like
Yeah, that's
it
true.
it wasn't in the hundreds of thousands of people that have been in the program, whereas the number of people that have moved here in the past, let's say 10 years, have been in the millions, right?
Mhm. Wait, no,
So
what was that again? So,
so the immigration wise, there's been like in the millions of people that have moved to Portugal from a variety of nations. We're not talking
right.
about Americans. Americans, it's roughly like we're at the levels of maybe 10,000, 12,000 right now, which is at the peak of
Right.
kind of American immigration in Portugal. But you have a lot of Brits that have moved to Portugal, Brazilians. Those are kind of the top nations in terms of numbers. I can't remember who's third, but from what I've seen, you've got 1 million people that have moved to Portugal, maybe come and gone in the past 10 years. However, only maybe less than 100,000, even less than that, I think, have taken advantage of NHR.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is the majority of people have not taken advantage of NHR or moved because of NHR. Why is that? Like, is there something is there something we're missing about NHR, the value of NHR, and the taxes in Portugal that we're missing? If you're on a super low wage, for example, is it possible to pay similar taxes to what you are in the U.S.?
Well, you know, Josh, there's always this thing called the response bias. If you are hearing our voices right now, if you are in the audience, you are you're a subset of a subset of a subset of the population of people doing this immigration,
Yeah.
right? And so, like those two other nationalities that you just mentioned, Brazilians and Brits,
Mm.
those two populations have an entirely different set of priorities when they're
Okay.
moving here. And so when you think about like the range of reasons that people might have for moving to Portugal, money is not probably even making the top three. Like a lot of people are moving here for weather, you know, like
Yeah.
go to the
I was gonna say
Algarve
sun
and
and
people,
safety.
yeah, sun and safety. And it just feels like a relaxed place to live. I know lots of people from London. That's the first thing that they mention. They don't want to go back to London. Like it is a rat race. And then the Brazilians, their automatic inclusion, they can auto immigrate back, and um, they're granted their citizenship on an expedited path. And so there has been a lot of talk about the lack of safety in Brazil, and that's kind of like one of their top priorities. So people aren't thinking about money necessarily first. In the United States, we're probably among the world's most well-educated consumer class as far as how we consume financial services. And then again, within your audience, you have a lot of I hate this term, but the kind of the 1%, right? People that have mobility tends to be much more uh, aware of financial factors that are connected to just a whole range of things. Everybody else is just kind of doing their thing day by day. They don't have the luxury, I guess, of being creative with how they plan their financial lives out.
Okay, so I pulled up while you were talking. I pulled up the stats on kind of where we're at, and it appears as if the number of foreign citizens in Portugal as of 2022, the top three: Brazil with nearly 250,000 here, which represents 2.3% of the total population. Then British at 45K. But that one even might be hard to tell because there could be people pre-Brexit and who's actually registered, what's happening there.
Right.
And then Cape Verde. But Cape Verde is kind of in the numbers that get lumped with number 4, India, number 5, Italy, number 6, Angola, that general
Yeah,
population.
but that's kind of fascinating, right? Because Cabo Verde, it's so small. Right. So like the fact that they are even showing up in the top three tells me that there is a massive exodus relative to the size of Cabo Verde's population. And again, they get auto inclusion for
That's
the same reasons as the Brazilians, because they're a former protectorate of Portugal.
Yeah.
So that's their story as well.
Okay. So zooming back in on Americans, because that's the bulk of our audience. As of 2022, we just cracked the top 20 of immigrants living in Portugal. So I think the next bit of data that'll come out on 2023's census stuff will show for sure that we have at least 10,000 Americans here, but it's not a sizable number. Do you think that there's actually an economic impact on Portugal with the number of Americans here?
There has to be, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's just got to be. I used to think no. But I'm starting to, and this is just entirely based on my eyes and ears, right? Like I'm meeting Americans everywhere I go here, and I've been here for 5 years now, and I didn't really run into Americans just out and about. I mean, obviously, none of us did during the pandemic, so that's a weird factor. But like, there are Americans showing up in my children's schools. There are literally children cycling out and being replaced by American children. So again, anecdotal entirely, but yes, there's increasing numbers of Americans, and it must be making its way into the economy. It must be, because Americans, they have money to spend, and they do tend to spend a bit more.
Do you think that is a positive or a negative? Like, where's the net on that? Net positive, net negative?
It has to be a net positive.
Okay.
But I'm an optimist.
Okay.
I'm an optimist. I know that there's going to be always somebody that hears that and goes, well, of course it's a negative. It's always the gentrification story, right? There's always winners and losers inside of any situation where there's a high rate of change. And so it's going to amplify the rate of gain, and it's going to amplify loss. So if you're cutting hair, or if you're providing a personal service like a personal trainer, like, you are happy if there are more moneyed individuals coming in through your business, right? But if you are working as a government employee, how does it help you? It doesn't help you, So there's people in different positions that can be affected at different rates. I don't know, but if you're young, I would think that you should absolutely hope for more money and more business opportunities. They've been a net exporter of bright, well-educated people, Portugal. So they need the bump.
So why do you think young people should be optimistic? Can you expand on that?
Well, take my business, for example. So I've been here for 5 years, finally just getting around that lip of being able to sort of expand, right? And so that means that I'm going to hire people.
Okay.
That's it, right? I mean, there's going to be more business opportunities across the board. Actually, my wife is a better example. She works for a large pharmaceutical company that's based out of the United States. And they created an office here, which is about half Portuguese nationals, right? And so that right there is like 1,000 jobs. That can't help but be great. And they actually have just been nominated as the #1 place to work in Portugal. So how could that not be great, right? I mean, I know that like the euphoric optimism that I might be projecting, it might be. I'm learning this, right, Josh? As somebody out there is going to go, yeah, but but no, really, like if there's more jobs, there's more talented people coming into this economy. Um, on the long view, it's all good. In the short view, it's definitely not good for some people, but that's always the case, I think.
Yeah, I mean, some people would say it's putting pressure like on the housing market, or it's either stock wise of housing market or price. Uh, but then if you look at what employment taxes are, the new jobs that are here in Portugal, the amount of revenue that'll come from those jobs will be good for the social state,
hmm
right?
It's going to generate additional tax revenues.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the problem with high taxes, right? Is there's always two ways to look at high taxes,
Mm.
and there is a perspective which is positive that says that there's more money coming into the government's coffers. Now, if the government's doing a great job, which we could talk about that, if they're doing an efficient job with cycling the money back through the economy, then that's all to the good. But there's a variety of outcomes that aren't all positive.
Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, I want to get your take, at least from a financial perspective, of what just happened with the elections. Uh, do you think with a more center right government, we're going to see broader changes with taxation, with immigration? Because I think those kind of go hand in hand a bit. Yeah, what are you seeing in terms of your news consumption and
Well,
understanding of it?
yeah. I mean, so the PSD has just secured more seats in Parliament, and they now have
Correct.
the majority, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so center right, and so their policies actually look like they're more pro business. I mean, certainly they're more than the communists, or a little bit further left on the spectrum, the Socialist Party.
Mhm.
So the PSD is going to be more business favorable. But this week, they're actually deep into uh, figuring out who's going to have the voice, who's going to
Yeah.
be the head of the what's it called?
The
The
prime minister, right?
yeah, the prime minister and the composition of the basically parliament.
Parliament. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they need to hammer all of that out.
Yep.
Um, yeah, but they have made some statements during the run up to this election that they are going to be more inclined to open up the border, or not to open up the borders. God, please, I didn't say open up the borders ever, but yeah, no, they're going to be pro-immigrant in the ways that help the country, and they were before too. They were trying to throw some red meat to their constituents and say, we want to keep immigration down, but when you look closely at it, they weren't really doing anything to throw the gates shut, but they have now, and so I think they're going to open them back up again. Actually,
Okay. And do you think that we're going to see some some incentives like NHR 2.0? Because that was something that was rumored to be, and it sounds like it's going to be something more specialized in tech, maybe pharmaceuticals. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if your wife's company is kind of in that. Yeah. What do you know about that?
yeah. So they actually have already voted on that,
Okay.
and so the NHR 2.0, I forget what the acronym for it is, but it's out there online,
Okay.
but it is extremely narrowly focused now.
That's what I thought. Mhm.
Yeah, so it's basically for startup companies,
Okay.
right? And so I think that that's just a safety play. They were just like, let's get the ball rolling here, and what kinds of NHR like benefits can we extend? Yeah, so they created this super specialized band, but it's not at all what the old NHR was. It's basically helpful to people that are coming here to start a startup company, and they're going to
Okay.
hire a lot of Portuguese people, and they are already, and they have already secured funding. That's a prerequisite. Is that the company has already basically got a round of funding, and so that is not at all the same group of people that were getting the NHR before. That was
So
yeah.
it's a specific plan that doesn't necessarily help most of our audience. Most of our audience would fall into people that could have taken advantage of the first NHR.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see Portugal doing an NHR that looked more like the first one, whereby pensioners retirees had lower taxes on their retirement income?
I think they will.
Okay.
I think they will, but that's more speculation. I just think that they're smart, and what just happened was just a mess. Like the way that they called for an end to NHR at the same time as the government imploded.
Mm.
I mean,
Well, that wasn't planned.
yeah, I don't think that was. It certainly didn't have the feeling of a planned series of events.
Yeah.
But it also seemed highly coincidental, and I'm not a conspiracy deep state guy, but why is this all happening at exactly the same time? I don't know. You never know what's going on.
It felt very bad for the Portugal brand, like as a brand, as like, because I'm sure there's some department that is in charge of kind of branding, whether it be for tourism or just as the country as a whole. People that have to think about this type of thing. It was definitely a blemish on the brand of Portugal. Because Portugal, I think for many people has been known as a place of stability, like political stability, and there was not very much stability at all in the midst of all of that. Whereas our neighbors, Spain, seem to have taken up both interest from people who were interested in moving to Portugal, and also the reputation of being more politically stable. So, what do you see between the futures of Portugal and Spain in terms of attracting people to move based on what they're offering, the maybe financial benefits?
I mean, first of all, we're Americans, right? And so if anybody's got the corner on the market of wrecking their national brand in this last decade, I think we can smell our own right now.
Yeah.
But Spain has always been a huge draw for a certain class of Americans. I shouldn't say class. There's a group of Americans for whom Europe was very appealing, and Spain and France and Italy, I think, were among some of the most popular places. Portugal was not historically a popular place for a variety of reasons. Spain is always going to be an attractive place to go to. So I think this shift back to Spain is more a relative thing. Portugal has just recently dropped. And so, the Spanish level of interest is probably just a throughput. And Portugal was bringing in some new attention. It looked like the hot thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're saying something different, but I think people that were previously interested vocally in Portugal are just trying to do what people do in this social media world, is throw up their flag and say, yeah, well, I'm real interested in Europe still, but you know what though? I'm smart. I'm thinking Spain now, because there's not that big of a difference between the two countries when I look at the numbers.
No, that's what we see. So what are some numbers that you see, and how do you compare them?
Well, I mean, I'm just always looking at inputs, outputs, right? Like if you put $120,000 of income into either country, right now, without NHR, your taxes are coming out almost exactly the same. So, non-NHR or Beckham law rates, you're getting the exact same tax rates in either country. So there you go. And Spain, actually, it scares me just a little bit more because their IRS is well funded. so they
check up on stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, their enforcement arm is going to be much more robust, just like what we have in the United States. And again, I'm not a cynic. Well, 100%. I understand that's not a good reason for wanting to be in either place. But that party has many more security guards stationed at the exits. So, they're going to collect those taxes a little bit more aggressively than Portugal will.
Okay. What about the wealth tax? So how does that play into it? Because literally online, we posted a video about Spain and Portugal, and so many people commented on this wealth tax in Spain, as if Portugal doesn't have it, which I don't believe Portugal has a wealth tax. So what is a wealth tax?
Well,
do we have it in the US?
We for sure don't have it in the U.S. So a wealth tax. So in the U.S., we're just taxing you when you're making money. That's it, and we actually tax you at a far lower rate than anywhere else, anywhere else in the world. Although you could be surprised to hear that because Americans are constantly complaining about their tax rates, but we don't have a wealth tax and we've got a low income tax rate. But like a wealth tax is an annual tax, just like a property tax on your liquid assets. So, it's like 1% over, I think it's 700,000 euros. Um, Over 700,000 euros, you're going to see a progressive wealth tax starting. And that wealth tax is going to apply whether your money does anything or not. And that feels very offensive to
Mm,
to the American mindset. Like, but you're going to tax me even if I don't do anything. Wow.
right. And do you know they if the Spanish government enforces that tax on assets, liquid assets that you do not have in Spain, but that you have abroad, back in the U.S. or wherever you put that asset?
Yep, they do. They're
Wild.
taxing you. Yeah, it's totally wild. I mean, if you have 10 million bucks and you move to Spain, you better be aware, right? Because who wants to pay an extra $100,000 in taxes that they can't get away from? That's pretty considerable. So if you're very wealthy, you better take that seriously. And they are also going to tax you on any assets that you get while you're in Spain, Spanish assets.
Hmm.
If you deregister as a tax resident, so if you leave Spain, then you're going to be immediately also taxed on the unrecognized gains of anything that you have that you acquired while you were there. So you get real estate, you buy some stock. Like if the Spanish government can find that you acquired these assets while you were living there, whether you sell it or not when you leave, you're going to be immediately taxed on any unrecognized gains. That's a huge deal. People
Mm.
leave like the US all the time and intend to return. They're not going to get taxed on their unrecognized gains. It's a lot of extra money that's going to be taxed.
Okay. And this doesn't exist in Portugal. This is
Not,
a,
yeah.
a Spain thing. Anywhere else in Europe that has this
Italy.
that you know? Okay.
Yeah, I have a client in Italy that deals with this. The Netherlands have a somewhat different system. They have it's called the three boxes system, but they're basically taxing you on all of your liquid assets, whether you deploy them or not. Um, but yeah, lots of other European countries consider this a totally normal thing.
Mm.
You're wealthy, you're going to get a tax, and I mean, we do the same thing with properties in the United States with property taxes. But I think we sort of mentally bucket that with like, well, we're paying for roads and schools and et cetera, et cetera. But in the US, we are not taxing people on their Apple stock. Like this would be analogous to somebody who has 2 million in Apple every year. The government's coming around saying, yeah, 1% of that. What? You're not going to tax my stock portfolio.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. In your opinion, why did they do this? What's the point? Because it does seem like it would be something that would de-incentivize wealthier people from moving to the country.
Uh, well, Josh, I mean, it's mindset, pure mindset, right? Like they can, is why they will, and it's been done, is why they will. It's just you would never find, or you would very rarely find a European that would say, you know what, you are right. That's a total violation of my personal liberties. That there's a wealth tax that we're Americans, and so we come into it with our prejudices, and we're used to having a system that incentivizes growth as the number one element, which I am number one a believer of. Like that is why the long-term rate of return on the S&P 500 is like 10% for the last 5 decades.
Mm.
And sorry guys, but the developed markets, i.e. Europe, it's more like 4.6, 5% rate of growth.
Right.
You think about how spectacularly different our mindsets are. Like now it starts to become like super clear why there is a super high rate of growth in the U.S. in the business sector, and why people complain a lot about bloated Europe. They just don't think of it. They do it because they're taking care of everybody. It's a socialist mentality.
Hmm. So for those Americans and let's say Canadians that want to move to Europe and enjoy kind of a European lifestyle that we certainly don't have in many, if any, parts of North America, how do you kind of straddle the line between uh, investing using your income, your most likely better income from North America while in Europe, and obviously live here?
Oh man. Well, you got to realize that there's like two different parts of your life. Financial advisors actually think about it this way. There's the accumulation phase, and then there's the distribution phase, right? And so those two parts of your life actually line up really well with being in the US, part one, and then not during part two, because it's been said that, Americans live to work and Europeans work to live. Right. And so if you think about it, like being in America during the first part where you're living to work is totally a sensible move because your rate of growth financially is still optimized when you're in the United States of America. Right. But then you flip to the other side when you want to live and you're less interested in work, well, then you better be in Europe. I mean, this has just been my experience is that they really do take longer holidays. They're not prioritizing keeping the small business open on holidays,
Yeah.
right? Like, so if you've already made your money, then go to where your money spends better. And so, at the risk of sounding awfully cynical, it's like live in the U.S. while you're making money for sure, and then transition to where you can have your lifestyle be a little bit slower and where the focus is on lifestyle, if you can ensure that there's not a lot of other trade-offs.
Okay, so for those in their 40s and 50s and they're still earning and they want to live in Europe, is it possible to continue to invest in the US?
Oh, for sure. It's
Okay.
possible for just about anyone to come into the U.S. with their assets. Just like anything, where there's a will, there's a way. But like, if you're already American, then you've been probably already making investments inside of the U.S., and you're not going to find that the doors are just shut to you the minute that you move. So yeah, you just kind of keep on business as usual.
Okay. I mean, I asked that because I think most people that have moved abroad recognize that banking, for example, becomes problematic when you move abroad, using US banks and such. Uh, what's up with that? Why is that such a pain point? Is it something people are doing wrong, or is it just US regulatory things?
Well, it's interesting, Josh, because yes, there are banks and there's custodians, brokerage custodians, who do not like you anymore if you move to Europe, and it can actually vary significantly from one country to the next. There is, for example, at one of the brokerages I work with, there's like an internal list of the no-go zones, and like Italy's on that list, Germany's on that list. There's some gray areas, and then Portugal is totally fine. And so it's like it really is this sort of patchwork quilt. And again, like, remember when we talked about people not wanting to do their homework on taxes?
Hmm.
This has the feeling of another monumental homework task for somebody that doesn't do this 24/7 like I do. So they're
Sure.
like, oh my God, banks, right? Capital B. Like, that's a big, scary place
Hmm.
where, guys that look like the Monopoly guy work, and they don't want to let me do things.
Twirling
And
their
so,
monocle.
yeah, and their evil mustache,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, there really is sort of like this psychic wall that they can face. I mean, I talk to people about this stuff, and they go, "Well, I just don't want to change my banking system right now because the setup is set up, and if I change anything, it could all blow up." So that's bigger than you think. Is just like we build up these sort of psychological things that we don't want to disrupt for fear of everything kind of unraveling. But really, if you're creative, then there's no reason why you can't just set up your whole end to end money process to be just as tight as it was back at home. But it does take just a little bit more homework.
So you mean in terms of your end to end doing the same thing that you do in the US, but in Portugal? Or are you saying there's things that you can do with US banking to keep everything nice and tidy?
Yes.
Both.
Yeah, both of those things. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can just like you just have to rewire this thing. Remember
Okay.
when we had to like there was a moment where we were all changing to DVDs,
Yeah.
right? And I had like a stack of VHS cassettes back at home that I had like all of my home movies on. I didn't want to lose those. I had to actually convert these things. And so like if you're converting your old life to your new life, it's like that. Like it's a little hard, but it's possible to convert all of your old stuff so that you could just continue to function the same way that you did last year. But you have to go through a conversion process. So I'm talking about like using things like Wise and Revolut and a number of other, sort of connecting elements so that you can rewire your banking framework to work just as well as it did before. But you got to do that. You got to rewire it.
Cool. Because that gives me a lot of comfort that Kaylee and I are doing things right, like we're on the right path. Because essentially we've had to do that. Certainly, whenever we moved here and got deeper into Wise and letting that, in a way, be like an intermediary between our US dollars and US bank account, and then
Sure.
our European euros and bank account. And a lot of times we just kind of leave money in that account and have that card that we have through Wise be a backup whenever we're traveling, or actually be the primary card. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we go to places and our Millennium card will act a little funny, at least mine does, and I can just pull out the Wise card and tap and go wherever I need to. So okay.
Yeah, but you had to figure that out. You had
Yeah.
to, be a little brave.
Mm.
And some people, everybody moves at different rates through this sort of like learning process, and that's why I love my job, incidentally, because I get to. Sometimes I'm bored when I'm at a party because I don't get to ask the questions I ask my clients, because I love to figure out what people are really doing, and it makes me far better at helping everybody else. So yeah, that's all it is.
Well, that was something I wanted to ask you is this something that you help your clients do? Is it something that you advise on, or actually on a technical point of view, do you set this up for them?
I can't set it up for them. So, but it's something that we talk about and that I help with, and I do every bit of work that I can, except that last mile, I guess, because unless I have power of attorney, and frankly, I don't want that because that's like added liability for me.
Yeah.
Some advisors do, but those are like, family office advisors that have literally like 10 clients. And I provide that assistance and I show people how to do it, and I take them through the steps. So yeah, it's definitely something they need to know, because their financial well-being is ultimately my goal. And so if they're having anxiety about these sort of foundational blocks, then we're not going to get to work on the more fun stuff, helping build their wealth through more interesting steps. So yeah, it's a big deal.
So with the bulk of your clients right now, do you work on building wealth, preserving wealth, or enjoying life now and spending what you got? Where are people at?
What's interesting is I don't know. I work in all these areas. My goal as a professional is to always sort of meet people at their level. And so my wife would laugh, and she did laugh the other day. I said this at the dinner table and everybody glared at me. I have to be a good listener. And I think I am. You have to be a good listener and figure out where people need the most amount of help, because that's where you can have the greatest amount of impact, just like with anybody. So I have to figure out, like, this person wants to, get rid of all of their stocks that have a bunch of capital gains, right? And build out their investments in a different direction. This person wants to meet a Portuguese tax lawyer, right? And they want to understand how to identify the good ones, and cut bait with the bad ones. Like, there's a whole range of things that personal advisors help, and that's why I say that I'm a generalist, and with good reason, because ChatGPT is not trained up enough yet to help on all of the different circumstances and applicable issues that people run into.
Okay. So now with the new let's say the dust is settled. We know what the NHR situation is like. We know that people now moving to Portugal are moving as a regular taxpayer would. There's no benefits per se. Are there any things that you've now noticed that you would say, look, you fit this financial profile? Portugal doesn't really work for you unless you really, really just want the lifestyle, the safety, the sun that we, first started talking about at the beginning of this conversation.
Portugal's good for everybody.
Okay.
No, it's like I literally have a spreadsheet, right? And there's just people have different levels of compatibility with the tax code here. So you really do just have to sort of plug in everybody's constellation of variables and
Okay.
figure out whether it's a green or a red, or maybe it's a yellow light. And we just need to proceed carefully. That's really what it is. Because some people, God, there was one person I talked to that had, and this is a professional term, they had more money than God, right? And they said, can I do Portugal, or is it going to just blow me up? And I ran the numbers for them, and their configuration of income was such that they were going to pay almost the same without NHR here as they were paying in the US in taxes, right?
Oh,
And then, yeah, because they were making money from, there's various forms of income, right? And so they had like the right mix. They had the perfect mix. And sometimes I do this in real time, and I looked at the output and I said, wait, that can't be right. Because you're paying, we'll just say like 50,000 in the US, and you're paying $52,000 US dollars. Huh. Right. And it's just like that time that Warren Buffett pointed out that he was paying proportionately less in taxes than his secretary. Right. And it's because of the mix of income that he was in receipt of. And he didn't ever make it right, by the way. I love that story because Warren never came back around to cough up more tax dollars. But for the same with my clients is I'll point out, like, look, this is a win because your taxes are the same. Meanwhile, you are 56. This couple was 56, 57. And you are not going to retire. You're not going to have the benefit of Social Security for another 10 years. And so in that next 10 years, you don't get Medicare, you don't get Social Security. Like this is a total win for you because you can go live in a socialized healthcare system, for example, and receive the benefits of this and pay taxes in Portugal that are the same. So that's a win.
And lower the cost of living, I'm sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so that's a win. But then there was a guy, I think I met him through you, who came to me last year, and I ran the numbers for this guy, and he was making, the wrong kind of money, and his tax bill was going to jump by double when he moved here. And that sucked because I really liked that guy, and I could see the light in his eyes die. He was like, oh no, is that really true? And I was like, yeah, that's true. Unless you can stack the deck differently for yourself. And I know you love your rental properties, but sorry, man. So it really is situational.
Okay.
Fully.
And is rental income maybe one that I don't want to say stay away from, but that's one that maybe might get taxed more heavily versus another source of income that is taxed more favorably in Portugal?
Yep.
What's the more favorable one?
More favorable is interest dividends.
Okay.
So I do a high yield dividend strategy, for example. And the idea was always that it's like a safer way to invest. So that's whatever. But come to find out that dividends are all taxed under a preferable tax regime here. So, and it makes me sad because investing in properties is traditionally one of the best ways to grow your wealth.
Yeah.
Period. Point final. But
Agreed.
here in Portugal, if you have a bunch of US properties, it's not the case. So that's just one of those things. And there's just a whole range of other circumstances that are like this, that they're great in one country, and then you step over to Portugal and you go, oh, that's not great. So
high yield dividend stocks are something that I'm really wanting to get into personally, because I've been in into real estate and having rentals, but it feels like it's time to make a little bit of a shift. Certainly living here.
Yeah. Well, come join. Come talk to me, my friend. There's things to look for. But yeah, so it's just weird that that there's some things that we've been taught to sort of like basic fundamental laws that don't apply when you step into this other world.
Fascinating. John, I look forward to coming down to Lisbon and chatting with you as we are going to cut a YouTube video together talking about Spain versus Portugal, like more in depth.
Let's do it.
But today's conversation was awesome, and I appreciate your time as always. And I think our audience is always able to get value out of things that you have to share. And if people want to work with you, we'll put that information on how to get connected with you in the show notes below, because you do have a specific Calendly link where people can book a free call.
And it's for your guys. I've kept the door wide open for your guys, Josh, because they're super nice. Usually, no, actually 100% of the time.
we try to attract good people. So we've fared well in our community, and we appreciate the fact that our community has been so cool. So that's good. I
agree. Well, thank you, man. I still watch your videos, by the way. I think you just did one about, are you beating inflation? Yeah. That's the one I just watched, right? Yeah. And good job for beating inflation. But it's easier when coffee was $1 last year, and it's 10% more, and now it's $1.10. So
that's it.
I love it.
We find ways around it, though.
Heck yeah. All right, man.
Mate. Appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.